Whether you saw the job loss coming or it hit you like a ton of bricks, as it did so many people, the emotional impact is real. But this isn't just about emotions, it's also about strategy.
Welcome to the Transition Blueprint.
I'm Michelle McKenzie, and welcome to the Transition Blueprint. I'm a career transition and executive coach and the founder of Empowering Insights. In this episode, you'll learn how to cope with the emotional impact of a job loss, what the 5 stages of grief look like in career transitions, and steps to take now to get back on track. Today, I'm speaking with Lisa Case, a licensed clinical social worker and counselor, to discuss managing the emotional weight of a job loss and building emotional resilience. Lisa, welcome to the Transition Blueprint.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Now, let's get into it. Job loss can come with its own type of grief. What should people experiencing job loss understand about the grief process and how that can accompany job loss? And that if they're feeling down, it's not just them, it's natural part of the process of grieving a loss.
Yes, it's absolutely not just them. What I kind of want to do also is contextualize that for our federal workers or people being affected right now, the context of what is happening and how it is happening is particularly difficult psychologically. So when you look at job loss, what we know about that is that that is a devastating, just a normal like layoff is just going to be a devastating major life event. Extremely stressful, extraordinarily difficult, to get past. And it's going to kind of shake us the same way that if somebody just suddenly died in our lives did. But what we have currently compounding this situation is a lot of uncertainty. And so, one stage, we all sort of tend to, I think, be pretty familiar with denial. So, the first stage of any sort of major unexpected loss is this sort of like, this isn't real. This isn't real. It's not happening. There may sort of be a like this, and then you go into with the denial sort of a bargaining, and the bargaining is going to look like, I think this was a mistake. They probably didn't mean to lay me off, or like the company
Or
will,
not me specifically.
not
Maybe those
me,
other people, but not me.
right? Or the company will recover. Like this is some sort of mistake. The challenge right now for people is that that is happening to some people. They went back and said, oh, we messed up. Please come back to work. So it's going to be more challenging for people who are having trouble kind of accepting all of this, because there is this remote possibility of like maybe your job was one of the mistake jobs. And there's still people in this sort of like, no, the funding is being restored, but wait, it's held up. No, the company's going to survive. I mean, I have people on a weekly basis dealing with, guys, my job was gone, but now wait, it's looking like maybe it's going to be okay. And then 2 days later, they're like, oh no, I just found out it's not. And so we want to really normalize and contextualize for folks that this is harder, because this isn't just a layoff and it's done and it goes away. And so that's a piece. The other piece that is making this harder for folks is exactly what you named in the introduction, that I think for a lot of our, not everybody is in Washington, D.C., but Washington, D.C. is a deeply, and I think the federal government in general, for those folks, is a deeply identity based field. You go into this field because you are mission driven. You live in the city because you are mission driven. You are committed to what you do. And what the research tells us, there's research by Von Ursel, who looked at complicated grief with job loss, is that it's our jobs are tied to our social identity. And the more that our culture is tied to individualism, and that our job and our worth is tied to who we are, the harder it's going to be for us to recover from that. So the big joke about Washington, D.C. is you don't say, how are you? You say, what do you do? Like that is who you are, and that is your value. You're at a cocktail party and people are like looking over your shoulder like, you're not who I need that. And that is who lives here. And so I think this is particularly devastating because losing a job is not just losing money and a job. It is losing our social relationships, our social context, all of that. And so we want to just hold that and really acknowledge that people are going to struggle with that. Um, and then in terms of the grief cycle, you also will have the depression that I think, the sadness of finally coming to and I think a lot of people are having trouble with kind of feeling really stuck, really low energy, motivating to do a job search, motivating to figure out what's next. That's the depression phase. That can last a long time. And
And
then
it varies
anger.
from person to person.
Absolutely. And some people skip it. Some people
Yep.
deal with grief, right, by being like, I'm going to put
By
my head
moving
down,
into action right
right?
away.
And those people are going to get really irritable, probably. That's what I see. There's some people I'm like, could you just cry? You need to just cry. Like, because those folks move into action and they deal with stuff and they may get depressed later. They might actually get depressed after they start the new job and be really confused.
Can we stay here for a little while
Mhm.
longer, Lisa, about the people who try to skip the sad stage and go straight into the action stage, thinking that they're winning the the grief cycle, when in fact they're just delaying the inevitable? Because I've seen this outside of job loss. I mean, it's very similar to any other type of grief when you lose someone. I saw it with someone that I know personally who lost someone who was very important to her, skipped the sad, depressed stage, right? Went into, oh, I'm toughing it out. I'm a trooper. I'm fine. And then that part caught up, and it was years later,
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
and hit her so much harder than I think it would have been if she'd just gone through it at the time.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important part for those people who think, okay, I'm just going to get over this and I'm going to start applying for jobs and I'm going to just jump back into it. That it's a process and you might jump over it now, but it might become a hurdle later on.
Yeah, and I absolutely, and I'm one of those people. I have been chronic, like, just put your head down. That's how I cope. And I think for some people they may need to do that. I think for some people there is a systemic shock that is so great that they may stop functioning if they went to the feelings, right? And they sort
So
of
it's a
know that.
coping
And
mechanism.
a job is so survival based. They might know I cannot afford to like lay on the floor and not function. And so we want to honor that. And yes, have them not be confused, because what you're doing is when we don't feel something, we're chronically stressing our system. So what I say is, imagine a toddler who needs to have a tantrum or a cry and isn't. And they're like a nightmare. I mean, they're just like kind of a ball of, you know what I mean? This toddler trying to hold it together. And that's what these folks are like. So you're putting like stress on, there's stress on your system. You might be really irritable. I have a lot of people like, why am I blowing up at literally anyone around me? And I'm like, because you need to have a good cry and your system isn't ready for you to face this yet. And so you're irritable. That's how it's going to feel. Um, but I think if you have access to it, it's a lot of people I think they can't tolerate the feelings and they don't know that like it's really going to be a cry and it's going to pass and you're going to feel a lot better. But some people don't believe that or trust that, and that's okay.
Okay. What are the other stages that
So the other stages will be anger, and that part is also complicated right now because that part, so what von Ursul's research shows is when a job loss is associated with an injustice or a perceived injustice. So let's say a typical layoff where you're like, I got laid off and this idiot who's working below me and like never does anything, he's still there. It will be more difficult to deal with and to process emotionally. And you can get into this, what they call complicated grief, which I don't even know if I believe in. But if we imagine this entire thing feels unjust, it's profoundly unjust and unfair and arbitrary. So it's harder for the mind to make sense of that and to let it go. And I think people are going to be more likely to get stuck in the anger and rage because they have legitimate reason to be
Right.
angry and rageful, right? So it's confusing. And so, and we want to know that anger takes a toll on our body. It is not great for us. And I don't want to invalidate you have reason to be angry, but figuring out a way to work with your anger and make it productive so that it's not eating you up, I think is going to be the challenge.
So I love the term productive anger because anger by itself can be self-destructive or a useless emotion if it's not channeled properly into productivity. But also, can we talk about who catches hell in your anger phase? It's the people who are closest to you, who love you, are the ones who catch hell as a result of your anger and your rage. And so they are going through it with you, especially in the anger and the rageful stage. So just to be mindful of the ones who are around who love you, that they're not the source of your rage or anger, but can be the ones who catch that hell.
Yeah. And it's really hard. I think that's a painful part about this is because people can't exercise their anger at who really deserves it, right? They're in this powerless kind of position. And so it's also taking a toll on us. That not only is it like your kids, your partner who did not do this to you and don't want this for you either, but it's also eating us up. And so figuring out a way to be like, what am I going to do with this anger that's going to kind of get it out and going in the right direction, even though I can't yell at the people doing this to me, I think is going to be important and challenging.
So
And
what comes
then
after anger?
so then and keeping in mind and the anger, the other pieces that I wanted, because you had asked me, which I think was smart, to name sort of what these might look like behaviorally. And I should just note that the anger can look not just like, raging out at people, snapping at people. It can look like kind of ruminating really angrily, like going over what you wish you would have said or like what you wish you could say to somebody. So that kind of like angry churning we do in our minds. It can look like doom scrolling and keeping like an anger feed, kind of, a lot of like outrage bait, like kind of just feeding that kind of thing. So anger can look like a lot of different things. It can look like substance use sometimes. Using substances to kind of, well, they did this to me, I'm gonna, and kind of either trying to tamp down feelings, or like substances can exacerbate anger, which we want to just be mindful and care, that can get kind of dangerous. And
I think
then
that's a great point to mention.
yeah, and substance use is a risk in all for everyone's mental health in this. It's one of the primary ways that people cope. And so it's for people who are sober, they're I think there's going to be a lot of like relapsing. And then for folks who were using substances anyway, kind of like in the pandemic, we saw this uptick of people drinking and or smoking or whatever, and I have no judgment about any of that. And we want to understand that it doesn't really help us in the long run, because it's adding to our anxiety, it's feeding the depression. And so we just want to be mindful about relying on that, because it's another way that we think we're like maybe taking out our anger outside, but we're doing something to ourselves that could be harmful. And sometimes that's just what people have in terms of coping. It's really complicated and really hard. Um, and then in theory, once you get through all of that, there is an acceptance phase that might look like, the kind of like the moving on. And some people may get to this an hour after they're laid off, and some people it may take a really long time. But this is going to look like it is what it is. It happened. I can't change it. I have to move on and figure out the next thing. And that's, I think I think grief always cycles and changes, but that acceptance piece is probably what's going to move people forward when they're ready.
Lisa, thank you so much for walking us through the 5 stages of grief, which are denial, bargaining, depression, anger, and acceptance. So, what are the biggest mistakes people make when dealing with job loss emotionally?
I think what you named with the skipping over the feelings piece, I think that is a huge and again, we don't all have the emotional resourcing to be able to do it differently, so this is not a judgment. but I generally see that people make better decisions if they let themselves feel the grief and the sadness, and kind of, because then they can really locate themselves more authentically in where they are, rather than like, it takes so much effort and energy to push away those feelings. And I think we can kind of get into some bad decision making or impulsive decision making, or not see all the options. And crying literally releases like endorphins and hormones that help us think better. So there's that piece. Then I think there may be the tendency, what I really try to encourage folks to do is slow down, because I understand if you've lost your job and you're the breadwinner and you're dependent on that. But I do think there is a benefit to slowing down and letting yourself evaluate where you are. If you've been forced out of something anyway, if your job has been taken away, and I'm not trying to toxic positivity this at all, I think that is a moment to take an inventory of like, was that working for me? Is where I live working for me? Do I like this state? Do I like this town? Are there other, because I think especially for our federal workers, most of them, you sign up for that and you're like, I'm going to do this for decades and I've gotten this far, and you're not even thinking about quitting. And once you do get forced off that train, I do encourage people to take a minute and be like, well, let's really think about what you want to do next that's going to really work for you.
I agree. And I see that with clients that I talk to. And, there's lots of career transition support and webinars and things that are being offered right now. And a lot of them is focused on the job search. But I like to encourage people to do that level of reflection first, right? Don't just start applying for jobs, because do you even still want to be here? Or might it be a change anyway? And this was an opportunity to rethink and reevaluate the direction that you want to go in. So there's also an opportunity here. There's loss, but it's also an opportunity for you to reflect and to rethink and to perhaps reimagine what life after this period could look like. And that's an important step in the process that shouldn't be wasted, because there's an opportunity to do that. Now, we talked about jobs and their connection to self identity. How can someone separate their self worth from their job title?
I think first with folks, I want to just validate that, especially in these very driven, ambitious fields that people expected to be in, like for their whole career, to first just validate how complicated that is. Like for most of these people, most of your friends are in this field. Like most of your social relationships, you're either from grad school or in this field. And so it's very entangled. And I think we can come from a sense of like, well, I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't have this mix up between, and I don't know how you wouldn't in this town, right? First of all. So just normalizing, it's all interwoven. All of our personal relationships are professional in this context. And so first, just validate it. It's not your fault. There's nothing wrong with you. Our culture encourages this. Our culture tells you from day one, you are your grades. You are like how well you do in school. You are how well the instrument you play, like blah, like we are taught this. So that's number one. And then number two is kind of this slow process of encouraging folks to unravel and kind of be like, okay, but what other roles do I have? Your child does not care about your job or your identity, and your dog doesn't care about that. And you probably have friends that don't have anything to do with your professional life, right? That may be older friends or friends from a different world. And so I think encouraging you to maybe reconnect with relationships that don't have any connection with your work life, and even it's really vulnerable, but asking those people like, who am I? Why do you like me? Like, what is our relationship? It's kind of silly, but I think it can actually be really good training to sort of just envision ourselves in these other roles. Remember that those roles have value, and even talk to people about like, can you remind me of like who I am outside of this? I think we need other people to do that for us, especially for our folks in DC, where it's like this pressure cooker of professionalism. And then I think reconnecting with, it sounds silly and people get annoyed, but with activities and hobbies and things that we enjoy that don't have anything to do with work. You have them in you. They're in you. You may have lost touch with them because you've been very busy, but even if it's just going on, I like to walk in the woods. Can you find a trail and go walk in the woods and just, and it's almost like a detox. It's like coming off of a drug. It's like, and you're going to feel weird and uncomfortable. I'm not supposed to be walking in the woods. I'm supposed to be checking my emails and checking my phone. And why am I not needed? And that feeling of not being needed isn't very good either, because we've all been, that's like a drug we've all been taking for a long time. And I think it's an acknowledging to yourself, like, these were like dopamine hits to me, and I'm okay, and I can still exist, and I still have value, and it's going to feel awkward and odd. You're in a come down from like a drug. I think, honestly. It's a drug, this idea that we are all great because of what we can do.
Yeah, you mentioned walking and things that people can do to take time for themselves and to rejuvenate and relax. I was a walk to work type of person. That was my time in the morning to connect with myself, to clear my head, get ready for the work day. And so that is just sort of like a natural thing to me. And I've always tried to position myself to live in places that are sort of centrally located so I can walk to work because I need that time for me, right? To get ready for the buildup of the day, but also the come down, right?
Yes.
When I'm walking back to sort of like leave that there. I don't take that with me, but not everyone has the same types of boundaries. And lots of people have been caught up in certain very oppressive ideas of work and their identity. And so tell me a little bit more about that. We had talked about rest as resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you want to explain that a little bit more.
Sure. That is a wonderful book written by, she calls herself the Nap Minister, and her actual name is escaping me
Trisha
right now.
Hersey, I've
Trisha
read that
Hersey,
book.
yes.
it it delivered me.
Yes.
I listened to it via audiobook while walking to work. I listened to it twice back to back
Yes. Yeah.
because it was so nice. I had to do it twice. And it's like, I need everyone that I know to read this book.
Yes. And I prescribe it to some of my I'm like, you need to go read. And she has a great Instagram feed that will kind of like refresh you. But in our culture, I think part of what comes up for people is that we don't notice it, but we are systematically shamed for resting, especially as women. And I think, especially, I mean, you could speak more to this, but I think people of color probably more. And so when we are in rest, we have this feeling of like, this, I'm not supposed to be doing this. I should not be doing this. And she really breaks that down beautifully and kind of, offers the counter argument of like, we are not meant to be productive robots. But I think a lot of us literally are almost looking over our shoulders like somebody's going to yell at me. And so it really is relearning, like, you're a person, and that you are allowed to just be. And I think that reconnecting, for some of us, we like to make art. For some of us, we like to just walk. I have a colleague I do my own podcast with who likes to advocate just laying on the floor. Like, just lay on the floor, because we don't know how. We know so much about how to work and so little about how to rest. And so I talk to my clients. I mean, first of all, like what you were naming about walking, anything you can do with bilateral stimulation, so using both sides of your body, biking, walking, swimming, doing dishes, is very relaxing and kind of meditative for us. But I think there's a lot that has to go into giving ourselves permission. And I think especially when you're out of a job and it's like, I'm supposed to be looking for a job all the time. If I'm not looking for a job, then it's my fault I don't have a job.
So can
And
we
that,
talk about that? Can we
yeah.
just talk about that? Because many of my friends who have recently experienced job loss, who are still experiencing it, what is happening is that they are taking a break. They are taking rest and then are just amazed at how they had been functioning before. They're like, how was I doing all of these things?
Uh-huh.
And also taking the time to decide how they want to move forward in their relationship with work going forward, and boundaries that they might need to establish as they move forward in their career, where they are not burnt out and overwhelmed and feeling guilty for taking rest. Rest is not something for us to feel guilty about. And I can admit that even me sometimes feeling guilty that I should be doing other things when I am just tired. Recently, I was so tired. I knew there were things, and I'm a ruminator. I knew there were
Me too.
things that I was supposed to do. And I'm like, but I'm tired. I'm not going to do it. I put something on the stove, went and laid down, and that was a mistake. Because guess what? I forgot. It was a big pot of something that was boiling until I woke up and I was smelled something burning. That thing was on there for hours because I fell asleep. Why?
Because you were
Because I was
tired.
tired. I
And we
was
don't
so
even know we're tired. It's so sad. I'm so glad you said that. It's like we are so conditioned to think this is normal, and it's not like what we are doing. And you don't know until you stop. That's what your friends figured out.
Yeah, and this
And
is a big pause for a lot of people
Mhm.
to have the ability to just stop and let their own personal lives catch up to them. And then to realize that it is a lot and do that reflection, right? And that reimagining of what do I want my life to be and look like as I move forward in this next phase, as I'm in this transition period, and to take that time to really think deeply about that instead of just busying themselves with the job search, because it's going to be what you decide is going to be critical to the job search because you'll be looking differently.
yes, and to your mental health. And I call it all the bad boyfriend effect, that thing that happens. I've had it happen with jobs too, where you don't realize till you leave either the relationship or the job. You're like, "Oh my god, how was I doing that?" You don't know till you're not in it anymore. And I've been through that. I've watched friends go through it, and you're all just looking at the friend like, "Oh my god, just leave. This is horrible." And then
Yeah,
like
so
2
that is
months later,
100% what's happening
yeah,
to a
2
lot of
months
people.
later, they're like, "What was I doing?" And you're like, "I was trying to tell you." But how long did it take your friends? Did they go through a detox where they were like, "I shouldn't be doing this," or, like, was it just instant? They were like, "Why was I" like, did they have an
No, it wasn't
adjustment
instant.
phase?
It took them a
Yeah,
few weeks
yeah.
because we also realized we're like, um, okay, so you've been laid off, but we still haven't seen each other because they got busy doing other things. Like I
Yeah.
said, everybody got busy catching up on their lives
Mhm.
because there were so many things that had fallen through the cracks that they were now pulling out the cracks and getting done. And that was creating its own sense of busyness, right? And also,
Yes.
like you said, people being conditioned to be busy. And so they had to find something to do to fill the time, but with things that were pertinent to their lives that were
Yeah.
being neglected.
Yes, and when I think I saw this in the pandemic too. This I mean, I'm because I had small kids in the pandemic, so I had no time. I didn't need to fill any time. But I was watching, and it became we got the sourdough starters, and then everybody had a Zoom and a friend Zoom, and everybody got very busy. And I was like, y'all could just sit. I mean, but again, like we are so it's almost like an addiction. And I think Trisha Hersey breaks it down wonderfully with the like, we really feel like we're doing something wrong if we're not busy. And it took me like 3 to 5 years, I think, to get to the point once I read her book, I can't remember, and was like, "I have to stop." It took me 3 to 5 years to really be like, "Oh, I'm tired. I need to not do the thing. Even the soup doesn't need to get made. I'm just I just can't anymore." But to even recognize the feeling takes practice. And so I think and it's very hard when you have the financial stress and the survival mode, and that is all very real. And I even say to people, like, even if you have to take a job that's like some job you don't care about, or like, let yourself still be in that reflective stage of like, maybe I'm going to do this for a year or two, but what is the lifestyle that I need to not be in that survival, chronic stress, go, go, go mode? Because it's not good for our bodies. It's why so many of us are sick.
And don't let that bridge job distract you from your real goal.
Right.
Right? Don't fall back into sort of the survival thing where you're back on the wheel and then
Right.
you lose sight of what it is that you actually really want. Now, Lisa, what are small daily habits to maintain emotional resilience during periods of unemployment?
So the hard part about unemployment for a lot of people is the lack of structure. Some people do great with no structure, but I think we can all get into that kind of depressive, like, I'm just watching TV. What is my life? And we know that when we're combating isolation, I would say is number one. There can be, I think, this tendency because we're ashamed of losing our job, or everybody else has lost their job, or everybody else is, and they're all as depressed as I am, and I don't really want to talk to them. There's all kinds of things that can drive us to get very insular, and we think that's good for our emotional resilience, but it's not. If you need your alone time, fine. I'm an introvert. I need my alone time. And do not cut yourself off from people, and talk to people about how you're doing and how it's affecting you. I promise there's room for everyone's feelings, even though there's a lot of people going through a hard thing. So I think number one is just to stay connected with people who, and the important part about that too is staying connected and limiting your contact to people who are emotionally good for you. So that may mean not hanging out with people that are pressuring you. Why don't you have a job yet? Or not hanging out with people that are, there's kind of a really callous thing going on where people are like, well, yeah, people lose their jobs all the time. Like, this is life. Like, that's, if somebody stresses you out, this may be the time. Emotional resilience has a lot to do with who we're around. So being very discerning about who is helpful to me right now and who is depleting me. And the depleting people may go on the back burner right now. And then I think what you're saying about listening to your body. Am I tired? I promise you will not lay on the couch for 6 months, but you might need to for 2 weeks, right? So if your body is saying, I don't want to apply for jobs, I'm tired, maybe take a nap. And you might be able to apply. Like, I don't like the idea of like rest for productivity, but like, if your body needs a nap, take the nap. And I promise over time, you will need less naps, most likely. So I think the emotional resilience comes from listening to our systems. If you're hungry, eat. It's very basic stuff. If you need to go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom. Don't make yourself finish a call. This really basic honoring, because what you're doing is you're teaching your nervous system, I'm valuable, I'm worth listening to. And that is where our self-esteem and our self-worth actually comes from, is our nervous system believing like I'm worth taking care of. And we're the ones that have to do that for our own nervous system and for ourselves.
I love that. Now we're moving into a little lightning round segment,
Okay.
right? So, real quick, what's one thing someone should do today to take control of their career transition?
Acknowledge how you are feeling about everything just today.
Okay. After acknowledging, what's a second thing they should do?
Have a conversation with yourself about what felt really good about your old career and what did not feel good about your old career, so that you can start learning more about what you want going forward.
And once they've done that, what's the next step they should do?
I would say if you feel ready, you could start taking steps to look for what you're wanting, like kind of starting to explore what might be a good fit for me going forward. And if that feels overwhelming and you say, I'm not ready for that feeling yet, you might just take a nap.
Take a nap. I love it. It's as simple as that. And I think Trisha Hersey would agree. Just take a nap. Because when you wake up, you might feel a whole lot better. So a little action step for the audience. If you're feeling stuck, maybe try writing down 3 things that define you outside of work. That will remind you that you are more than your job title. Remember, job loss isn't the end of your story, it's the start of a new chapter. If you allow it, you're more resilient than you think, and your next opportunity is out there. Well, you have to get the clarity. After you do all these things, cry, nap, all the things, take the time, and then figure out what is the next version of you in the next chapter of your life, and then get going. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me. Any final last words, quick recap for the audience?
I think my final last words would be that whatever you are feeling is perfectly fine and perfectly normal, and there is nothing wrong with you. This is a lot.
You are perfectly fine. What you're feeling is perfectly normal. There is nothing wrong with you. I love that. Thank you so much. And for the audience, if this episode resonated with you, I challenge you to take one action today, whether it's journaling about your emotions, updating your resume, or reaching out to someone for support. If you found this conversation helpful, share this episode with a friend who needs encouragement. And don't forget to hit subscribe so that you never miss an episode of the Transition Blueprint. Keep building your blueprint. Your next move starts now. Join me for the next episode where I tackle this issue from the perspective of I've moved through the grief and I'm now wondering what's next. Tune in for the answer.